Okay, hello. Today is the 7th of July, 2023. And in 1573, Vignola died on this very day, the 7th of July. And this is the reason we talk about him today. I will begin with the end. In a way, Le Corbusier hated Vignola. I never quite understood why. Maybe it's not so complicated, but let's first look at an engraving of him. Now, usually engravings are done after someone died, and there was no photography at that time, so often these engravings are not accurate. So we might look at someone who had nothing in common at all physically with Vignola, or who knows, maybe it did and does. You see already here, look, he looks a little bit different. This is another engraving. So he died in 1573. So, some time passed since then, didn't it? He was one of the great Italian architects of 16th century mannerism. In fact, I read on Wikipedia that he was the greatest mannerist architect in Rome. His two great masterpieces are the Villa Farnese at Caprarola and the Jesuits' Church of the Gesù in Rome. The three architects who spread the Italian Renaissance style throughout Western Europe are Vignola, Serlio, and Palladio. Now, this text doesn't seem to be really very accurate, since I read at the beginning that he was a mannerist. So mannerism is not really Renaissance, but let's, in general terms, let's imagine that there wasn't such a great distance in time between what we call Renaissance and what we call mannerism. But to be placed inside a triad made of these names, I mean, Palladio, Sebastiano Serlio, and Vignola, it's not a little thing. Some drawings of this gentleman, whom again Le Corbusier hated with a passion, and maybe he hated Vignola, Le Corbusier, because he appeared to be, although this is not the case with Mannerists. Mannerists are actually, they were kind of how to say, they were deforming Renaissance, they were challenging Renaissance, and the orders, the so-called classical orders. So in that sense, he was not, a dogmatic architect if he was a Mannerist. In fact, the Mannerism is some kind of a deviant art or deviant architecture, if we talk about architecture. But again, Le Corbusier hated him, and there is a page in Le Poème de l'Angle Droit by Le Corbusier where simply and brutally and amusingly Le Corbusier writes Vignola est foutu, and the Romanians are entitled to smile because they probably imagine correctly what foutu means. Anyway, so some images from his books that were almost a law in architectural education for a good number of centuries. Maybe that's why Le Corbusier hated him, because he tried to canonize architecture, and the rebellious Le Corbusier didn't want someone else's dogmas or canons because he had his own. After all, what is the modular and all the systems that he gave birth to? Anyway, Vignola, but these drawings are probably done after Vignola. They are not really his. Now, Villa Giulia for Pope Julius III in Rome, 1550, 1553. Here, Vignola was working with Amanati, an interesting architect himself, who designed the Nymphaeum and other garden features under the general direction of Vasari, Giorgio Vasari, with guidance from the knowledgeable Pope and, surprise, surprise, Michelangelo. A medal of 1553 shows Vignola's main villa substantially as it was completed, save for a pair of cupolas. And this is the building. So again, Villa Giulia. I guess he liked buildings whose names began with letter G, you know, like Gesù, a famous church in Rome, which we are going to see. But this is Villa Giulia. And you wonder, why did Le Corbusier hate it here? I mean, I know I am going to be provocative now, but is Villa Savoie really better than this building? What exactly he did, because it's, I don't know if he did the whole building. It's a little bit complicated, because at that time, sometimes various architects contributed to a building, and you know, the documents are not as well archived as in our time. But I guess we can still have an idea of the architecture that was practiced either directly by him or, you know, in his proximity, maybe by others. Yeah, he was a star, because the city where he was born is called Vignola after him, and this confused me because I searched for images with his work, and I came across a fortress-like building which I like very much, which was not which I couldn't find in you know, biographies of Vignola. Well, later I learned that it wasn't that Vignola made that building; it was just a medieval fortress built in Vignola, but not by Vignola. Anyway, but that building, in my opinion, was better than some of the works he did, if not all of them. There are interesting, I think this is by Amanati, another interesting and architect and sculptor who was hated not by Le Corbusier, but by Michelangelo. Michelangelo disliked Amanati a lot, but you know, were they correct? Was Le Corbusier correct? Was Michelangelo correct? You know, these are subjectivities coming even from the greatest minds or the greatest talents. Anyway, Villa Giulia, where Vignola contributed, but exactly with what, I'm not very sure. Now, Villa Farnese, which is considered the kind of a masterpiece at Caprarola, 1559, 1573. Villa Farnese at Caprarola, not to be confounded with the Farnese building by Michelangelo and a few others in Rome. You know, it's a building very massive. I mean, you know, this Villa Farnese, as you can see, very, very massive, fortress-like, and with a circular courtyard. As you can see, this is the plan. This belongs to Vignola, the hated one by you know, Le Corbusier Le Grand. Yeah. So he died on this day, the 7th of July. I'm not very sure why he is considered a Mannerist architect, because I don't see here a lot of deviances. Really, it's a, you know, symmetrical building based on the Pentagon. I don't know. In painting, I know more about Mannerist painting than about Mannerist architecture. Actually, this could be an interesting subject to study, Mannerist architecture, which, considering the Mannerist painting, I would say that it's a deviant kind of architecture. You know, you allow a lot of poetical licenses, and you like to deform. So I would say that some of the architecture of today is in spirit Mannerist. While I don't see too much traces of Mannerism in the architecture of Vignola. Maybe in his drawings, I don't know. I'm not an expert in Vignola. I'm just paying homage to the important architects of this world as well as I can, but I'm not an expert. I'm sure there are people who, got a PhD, if not several, on Vignola. I'm not one of them. But I remember him on the day he died, which probably is not the case with those aforementioned doctors in architecture. Villa Farnese in Caprarola. Now, of course, this is not for proletarians, who can afford to live in such a building. But, if you are architects, maybe you should aspire to arrive where Vignola arrived. That is, one day, the town or the city or the village where you were born to get your name, to name itself with. What about that? It's something we cannot aspire towards these days, Can you imagine, a city called Gary or Hadid or I don't know.
So I missed that. Is this a residence?
Yes.
One residence.
If you can believe it, yes.
Sure.
It's certainly not social housing, no. It's not. And it's not as the most sustainable, although probably inside the temperature is great because of the thick walls. Sure. And I know what I'm saying because I'm talking from inside the railway station where it's so comfortable. Outside is hot, but inside is fine. It's just fine. You don't even contemplate getting a ventilator. So, Villa Farnese in Caprarola by Vignola and not Villa Capra, we see the Caprarola. We know that Villa Capra is a famous painting, not painting, sorry, a building by Andrea Palladio, La Rotonda. Rotonda, which Goethe was so highly appreciative of. I don't think Goethe would have been equally appreciative vis-a-vis this fortress-like villa, although it is convincing as a building, but it's too, it's too much in a way. But it is a famous building in the history of architecture. Villa, maybe we can call it Villa Caprarola, not to be confounded with the Farnese building in Rome. But Farnese in Caprarola. And it dominates the whole town, as you can see. It's where the Lord lives. Embellished walls with ornaments and frescoes and so on. Something we don't do. Another villa from 1566 onwards, including the gardens and the water features and casini. Now, maybe here we see traces of mannerism, the weakening of form and, the exoticisms that the mannerists allow themselves to employ. The Italians have some great gardens, that's for sure. But they are not the only ones. But you see the buildings, which are in fact two buildings, symmetrical right here on the right. They are small, so small compared to the whole garden. And the buildings are, two cubes essentially. You see them here, gray, and then the garden quite ample and developed artistically and. It almost seems as if the buildings were kind of an afterthought. And then first came the garden, and then, as an afterthought, they made two little buildings. They are not so little, but compared to the garden, they are. Interesting, this theme of two-ness. You have this, the twin buildings. There is something here that attracts me, two-ness. Maybe because I have a schismatic nature, probably, but like many moderns, maybe we need, many of us, Dr. Freud, to bridge the, the halves, the two halves. So, look, watercolor with the gardens. Now, I don't know if they kept them, because here the garden, you can imagine in 4th centuries and something, to keep the garden as it was designed in Vignola's time, it would be, I think, almost impossible. Chiesa del Gesù, here a very, very important building in Rome, the mother church of the Jesuit order, which would become a source for Baroque church facades in the 17th century. So he anticipated the arrival of the Baroque, and he is considered, as we read, well, as I said, it wasn't really written in the text I had, the most important Mannerist architect of the Renaissance, of Rome, sorry. And Mannerism situated itself between the Renaissance and the Baroque. So Chiesa del Gesù in Rome, the mother church of the Jesuit order, here it is. And it's one of the important churches in Rome. Not that Rome doesn't have many important buildings, but this is one of them. Let's read it again. Chiesa del Gesù, Rome. The church of Jesus.
Da.
I've heard the voice. If you want to say something, please do so. Anyway, here is an engraving, but done later, when Its Majesty, the car, was still to come. I mean, I said later from Vignola's time, but before the arrival of something to replace, the horses that we see here. And the interior is splendid, but then there are so many churches in Rome, and not only in Rome, that are splendid. These people, that's why they lived. They lived to build the churches that would endure, and most did endure. It was the culmination of the efforts, the civic efforts of a town, a city, or a village. So as it was almost a dogma to enter a church at west and move towards the altar, which was at east, because at east the light of the sunlight would come into being in the morning when it was sunny, and it was the symbolism of the sunlight that was congruent with the altar. So you move towards light, you move towards the beginning, to an auspicious beginning. And that's why always cathedrals and churches had their entrance at west, maybe not perfectly, like in this case, small deviation, but still you entered the church or the cathedral at west, and you moved through the nave towards the altar, which was at east. The ceiling is a metaphor for a visual metaphor for the heavens. And he didn't do the paintings, but you see what's going on here. It's incredible. And I don't even know who made these large scale artworks. It's truly a culmination of the building, and it's a culmination of the human longing for the above. Everything was like this. The music as well, it was all, for the glory of God. Something, of course, we don't do any longer, considering that Zarathustra warned us. God is dead. So of course we wouldn't spend a lifetime doing something like this today. We prefer to watch movies from Netflix or HBO on TV and eat popcorn.
It's a little difficult to tell from these pictures what is three-dimensional, what's two-dimensional. Does anyone
No,
else
these
see
are
something?
painted. They are
Oh,
not sculptures.
oh, the complete things. I see. Okay. That
Yeah,
makes
it's trompe-l'oeil. Yes, yes, you are right. Your observation is correct. They are done so skillfully that you think, you know, they are sculpted.
Oh.
Incredible. I mean, you know, it's maybe they have some sculptures too. It's this is almost like augmented reality. You don't know. It's halfway between virtuality and reality.
It looks like the dormers are cut out, but the sculptures are real there, but the rest is flat, I guess.
Right. I have to investigate more. I think around the windows they are, you know, sculpted. No? Now this is mannerism because it's very, you know, how to say, well, very dynamic and announcing, of course, the Baroque. In a way, it is already Baroque, but not really, because the Baroque has a certain I don't know how to say, the dynamic forms are already established and accepted, and here you can tell that it's still you know, at a transitional period, that, you know, the structure of the building as it is built is illustrated either through or amplified through the pictorial means, and then you have the you know the many figures depicted which are in contrast with the order of the either simulated or real of the structure of the vault. In that sense, is probably a mannerist statement. Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli in Assisi. Yes, Santa Maria degli Angeli in Assisi. I'm not sure if the remnants of Saint Francis of Assisi are not to be found here in this church in Assisi. But you see, he only had some interventions. The building was done by someone else, whose name is written there. Church of Sant'Andrea in Via Flaminia in Rome, the first church to have an oval dome, which became a signature of the Baroque. This is very interesting. So Vignola didn't use the circle or the cylinder, you know, or the dome on a circular base, but on an oval base. And in this, I think, yes, he was a mannerist, and the distortion of the circle into an ellipse or an oval which has two centers. So there is this two-ness with which the mannerists, I guess, played. It's a very, I like this building very much. It's austere, it's almost modern, but then, you know, the top part is based on the ellipse, not the circle. Very interesting. Vignola. So again, how is it called? Church of Sant'Andrea in Rome. It's Sant'Andrea in Via Flaminia, the first church to have an oval dome, which became a signature of the Baroque. Of course, it became, and it was also the case with Borromini in the incredible San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, What architects? My God, my God! I really think we need a revolution in the world and everywhere. You know, to become again idealists, to build maybe for unknown gods. You know, I'm tired of only seeing buildings for men and men and men and men. His Majesty man, Anthropos. Let's build for something else. Let's say, let's build a temple for friendship, or a temple for love, or a temple for, or maybe we shouldn't even use the word temple, but some kind of a building that incorporates, you know, some kind of a spiritual or psychological, at least, longing for symbolism, for metaphor, for something poetical. We are too prosaic, my God, you know. The only stars we have in the world today are those, you know, from Hollywood and sportsmen. You know, you have Calvin Klein, you know, in Times Square, advertising a new pair of underwear. I mean, you know, is it better than, let's say, the ancient times when people believed in another world with gods on the Olympus mountain, or, you know, at that time? Because I think we need a double reality all the time. Even this fact with augmented reality, and I just read about it, shows clearly that we are not happy with just one reality. We always need something else. And if we don't have gods any longer, well, we invent them. We call the stars, the human stars, the poor, trembling human so-called stars, who are actually not stars. Just because they are famous, we call them stars. That's because we don't have gods. You know, and did you think about the fact that at the peak of democracy, we still long for the king, the prince, and the princess? You know, Prince Charles, now King Charles, Princess Diana. Why the obsession? And yes, I think it is an obsession with the monarchy. Aren't we supposed to be democratic societies? We demolish the monarchies. Then why so much interest in monarchies? You know, a king, a prince, a princess. Every day I read on Yahoo News or some other news something about, you know, having to do with, you know, the celestial beings in England. Anyway, this is another engraving that was done, I guess, after he died. I don't know exactly in what year, but it doesn't matter. It's they didn't have photography, so they did, you know, drawings. Very interesting church, also kind of austere, no? I mean, both inside and outside. The only so-called provocative or idiosyncratic architectonic gesture is the ellipse, you know, the oval dome, which is shown here in all its purity and even austerity. Interesting building, actually, by Vignola, who died on the 7th of July. Palazzo dei Banchi in Bologna. And it is a palazzo, but anyway, a palazzo with big curtains on the ground floor. You know, these curtains add something to the theatricality of the building. The building is, I would say, it's a good building. It's a good architecture. It has a richness, the facade, which maybe even Palazzo Farnese, where Michelangelo was involved, doesn't have. So mannerism has its own interest, I would think. Maybe we can investigate a little bit Mannerist architecture. Because it was a reaction, it was the tiring of the certitudes of the Renaissance. The Renaissance, as you know, represented the rebirth of man from the so-called darkness of the Middle Ages. And yes, man returned on the scene triumphantly. Also, is not to be ignored that around that time, almost exactly that time, Columbus discovered America, and Michelangelo sculpted David, the famous sculpture by or statue by Michelangelo, the triumphant David, a splendid man. And and the Mannerist architecture, the Mannerist painting, they were reactions to the certitudes of that splendid rebirth of man. So that's why I said that Mannerism should be connected somehow with deviant art or deviant architecture. But I think for that very reason, it's probably quite well. It could be potentially very adequate for us to contemplate, because I think we have reasons to deform ourselves a lot, and we have well-known cases, no, like Frank Gehry, for example. Anyway, Palazzo Farnese in Piacenza. This was a grandiose project of a vast palace on a scale paralleled only by the Vatican Palace in Italy. The rectangular plan is circa approximately 111 meters by 88 meters. The actual construction, however, made up only less than half of Vignola's original project and lacked many of the planned architectural features. Missing elements include part of the exterior surrounding walls, the main facade modeled on the ancient triumphal arch and with a large tower, and the theater in the large inner courtyard. This is the building, again, very massive. Now, for this, I would imagine Le Corbusier protested. But who knows? You know, sometimes, as Carl Jung said, when we hate vehemently something or someone, is because something within that something or that someone is returned to us and reminds us of ourselves. You know, it's something within ourselves that irritates us, that we perceive in someone else. Maybe Le Corbusier, to an extent, saw something without being conscious, felt something of himself was in Vignola, and he rebelled. It is a massive building. I mean, here is just, you know, this view, but you see the courtyard, and God, you know, it's, sorry about this picture. I couldn't find a better resolution. I guess Vignola was you know, building, you know, for eternity, these fortress-like buildings, palazzo or villa. Yeah, here the decoration is Mannerist, but I don't know if he was responsible for the interior or the ornamentation as well. That's it. So let's have a short discussion, if you don't mind, about whatever you want, but mainly